Take out your phone right now. Open your calculators. Type in your current net worth, your home equity, retirement accounts, investments, savings, everything you've built over the last 20-30 years. Now subtract 30%. That number you just erased, that is what your children will actually receive if you don't address 3 specific problems in the next 12 months. Not because markets will crash. Not because you'll make bad decisions. Because of 3 invisible mechanisms that are quietly draining your family's inheritance right now, and almost nobody explains them in plain English. Most families in this position look exactly the same from the outside. They did everything right, paid off the mortgage, maxed out the retirement account, built something real over decades of disciplined, patient work. And then, quietly, without a single dramatic event, a third of it evaporates before it ever reaches the next generation. Not in a market crash, not through bad decisions, through 3 background processes that run silently the way a slow leak runs behind a wall you've never had reason to open. If your combined assets, home equity, retirement accounts, any savings exceed $200,000, what I'm about to show you applies to your family, directly. And every month this goes unaddressed, the erosion compounds. In the next 10 minutes, I'm going to name all 3 of these silent capital drains, specifically, with real numbers, and then give you a 90-day protection protocol. 3 concrete actions that plug those drains without needing a wealth manager, expensive restructuring, or a law degree. Stay through to the end, because the third action is the one most families never take, and it's the one responsible for the most preventable loss in inheritance protection. Let's start with the assumption that costs families the most. Most middle-class families believe estate taxes are someone else's problem, something reserved for wealthy people, mansions, private investment portfolios, generational dynasties. Here's the part that changes this. Several states have estate tax thresholds as low as $1 million. Massachusetts sits at $2 million. Oregon, just over $1 million. And those thresholds don't rise as fast as your home value does. Think about a $350,000 home purchased 15 years ago. In most metropolitan markets, that home is now worth $600,000 to $800,000. Layer in a 401k, a life insurance policy, a vehicle, a savings account, and a family that believed they were safely below the estate tax threshold suddenly isn't. Without proper legal structures, beneficiary designations reviewed, asset titling corrected, basic estate planning documents in place, the government becomes your estate's largest unintended beneficiary. Not because you did anything wrong, because your net worth grew faster than your documentation did. That is silent drain number 1, estate tax exposure that crept into your family's picture without anyone noticing. Silent drain number 2 is slower, but in some ways it does more damage. When assets don't have clear legal transfer mechanisms, trusts, properly updated beneficiary designations, real estate titled correctly, those assets must pass through probate. Probate is the court-supervised process of validating your will and distributing your estate. And here is what that process actually costs. Probate fees consume between 3 and 7% of total estate value in attorney fees, court costs, and administrative expenses. For a $400,000 estate, that's up to $28,000 gone before your children see a single dollar. And that's only the financial cost. During probate, which runs 12 to 24 months on average, your assets are legally frozen. Your family cannot access them. They cannot sell the family home. They cannot touch retirement account proceeds that weren't properly designated. While those assets sit locked in a court process, inflation continues eroding their purchasing power month by month. Here is the critical piece most families miss. Having a will does not avoid probate. This is one of the most widespread misconceptions in personal finance. A will is simply a set of instructions to the probate court. You still go through the process, you still pay the fees, you still wait 18 months. What actually avoids probate is different, and it's far simpler than most people realize, which is exactly why it's so unnecessary when families lose tens of thousands of dollars to this drain. Now we get to the third drain, and this one is different because it doesn't come from the legal system. It comes from inside the family. When heirs inherit without guidance, without structure, Without ever having had a real conversation about the family's financial picture, they panic. And panic decisions in the first 12 months after inheritance are devastatingly expensive. Selling inherited real estate at the wrong time because carrying costs feel overwhelming. Liquidating retirement accounts immediately and triggering income tax penalties that consume 15 to 20% of their value. Converting long-term investment positions to cash because it feels safer than sitting with complexity. Documented research on wealth transfer outcomes shows a consistent pattern. First-generation inheritance without structural guardrails, what I call liquidation guardrails, reduces inherited wealth by 15 to 25% in the first year alone. That's not irresponsibility. That's what grief and financial confusion look like when combined in the worst week of someone's life. Here's the reframe that changes how you think about inheritance protection. You are not just planning what your children will receive. You are planning what they will do with it in the moment when they are least equipped to make rational decisions. Those are two completely different problems, and most estate planning only addresses the first one. So here is the 90-day protection protocol. 3 actions: no wealth manager fees, no complex restructuring. First action, weeks 1 and 2, the estate document audit. When did you last review your beneficiary designations, not the year you first opened the account? Recently. Did you update them after a marriage, a divorce, a birth? Did you verify that your real estate is titled correctly, not just sitting in your name by default? Most families completed these documents once and never revisited them, but beneficiary designations legally override your will. If your retirement account still lists someone from 15 years ago, that person inherits that account, regardless of what your will says. Courts spend years untangling exactly this scenario. The 12-document audit checklist linked in the description takes approximately 2 hours to complete. It identifies the critical gaps before they become irreversible. This is where most families find the first problem, and it's almost always fixable at this stage. Second action, weeks 3 and 4, the tax exposure calculation. Your net worth today is probably not what it was 5 years ago. Your home has likely appreciated. Your retirement accounts have grown, but estate tax thresholds haven't moved at the same pace. That means your family's actual estate tax liability, at your current net worth, may be completely different from what you last considered. You can easily find the current estate tax thresholds for your specific state with a quick search. Once you have that number, you can model what happens if real estate in your market appreciates another 15 to 20%. Then model what happens if real estate in your market appreciates another 15 to 20% over the next decade, which is historically likely in most areas. If your exposure changes significantly, that's not an emergency. That's actionable information you now have time to address structurally before it's urgent. Families who calculate their estate tax exposure early have options. Families who discover it during the transfer process don't. Third action, and this one requires the most courage, weeks 5 through 12. The heir communication framework, the family conversation most people never have. Your children's single greatest protection against panic liquidation is not a trust document. It's knowing in advance what they're inheriting, what your values around that wealth are, and having enough financial context that they're not standing at an attorney's office in grief, making 6-figure decisions in real time with no frame of reference. That conversation feels uncomfortable. It feels like admitting mortality. It feels like raising children who are counting the days. None of that is what it is. What it actually does is give your family the gift of clarity during the worst week of their lives. The conversation script in the description gives you a structure for that first discussion: how to open it, what to cover, how to address family values around money without creating entitlement, and how to begin the basic financial education your heirs need before assets ever transfer. Families who have this conversation first consistently lose dramatically less in the transfer. Here's what the 30% figure actually represents. It's not a worst-case scenario. It's the documented average loss when families transfer wealth without addressing these 3 specific drains: estate tax erosion, probate fees and the hidden inflation cost of frozen assets, unstructured liquidation in the first year. For a family with $500,000 in assets, that's $150,000 built over decades that simply didn't make it to the next generation. None of that loss is inevitable. All three drains have specific, practical solutions available to any family willing to spend 90 days and 2 hours. The document audit checklist and the conversation script are both linked below. Start with the document audit. The families who lose the most in wealth transfer aren't the ones who built the least. They're the ones who assumed the defaults would protect what they built. Don't let yours be one of them. If this gave you something useful, subscribe for more on protecting, not just building, what your family has worked for.